Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, written by Frank Morin, narrated by B.J. Harrison. Sample. Otimat joined them, and the eager crowd pressed in around them. Otimat's easy smile faltered as his gaze flicked over Rasher. Before Balter could stop him, Rasher stepped forward and extended a hand in greeting, eager to finally meet the famous Bacon Master. "It's a sincere honor to meet you, Reaper Otimat." Even though they were the only two Bacon Masters in the city that Rasher was aware of, he'd never gained a one-on-one meeting. Otimat hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the watching crowds. Then he took the proffered hand and spoke in a slightly nasal voice. "Rasher, is it? I heard you've got a standing bet of 50 golden spatulas. No one can guess why your career has stalled." Well, that was not the reception he'd expected. "No one's guessed it yet. If you want to give it a go, you have to tell me a recipe I haven't heard before." Tempting. But why ruin everyone's fun so fast? The look in his eye suggested he knew. Fish sticks. Rasher flashed his trademark grin again, while inwardly he seethed. That liver-licking turkey chewer must have talked with the guild leadership in Wegiev. All he said was, "That's the spirit. In fact, how about I give you a free training lesson? I'd be happy to raise your skills a notch." The comment triggered a round of laughter, and Otimat tried to look amused. The Reaper's unfriendly eyes never left Rasher's. "I heard you're reckless." Otimat might know his secret, but Rasher had taken control of the conversation. He hadn't planned to push the Reaper, but like he taught his students, when hostility could not be avoided, stomp it like a grape. "If training with me intimidates you, why don't you sign up for the Paint Battle Championship, and we can meet in friendly competition?" That generated a round of surprised mutterings, and a few people even encouraged Otimat to pick up the challenge. He never would, but the pressure irritated him, and that was a beautiful thing. Otimat leaned a bit closer and said softly, "I don't play at war. When I fight, people get hurt." That triggered a round of whistles and cheers from the crowd. It was disappointing to realize he'd never had a hope of a positive meeting with the man, but he'd long ago learned to adopt flexibility of mind like a well-cooked noodle. Sumwinkle smoothly interjected before Rasher could respond. "Excuse us, we've got a private function to attend." Rasher turned to him, hoping to rescue something out of the rare opportunity. "Reaper Sumwinkle, I apologize for interrupting your evening. Balter, I have no idea what I did to offend you, but I apologize for that too." "Figures. You're clueless as well as useless," Balter muttered. His hopes fell like a cake pulled too early from the oven. If he backed away now, he'd only make them think he was cowardly. So he said, "Balter, you've repeatedly insulted me without provocation. Your mouth is bigger than those giant elephant ears plastered to the side of your head. I'm afraid I'm going to have to teach you a lesson in manners." Balter swelled with menace, and the people pressing in on every side recoiled with audible gasps. Expectant silence blanketed the crowd like a top crust dropped over a freshly prepared pie. Balter's corded muscles bulged as he clenched his huge fists and growled, "I think the two of us need to step outside." Rasher grinned, a plan forming. Brawling in an alleyway would not serve any useful purpose. But he had Sumwinkle's attention and was not about to waste the opportunity. "All those muscles have squeezed your brain space. Here at the Bubble and Squeak, we don't step outside." He lifted his hands high, glancing around at the crowd. As one, they all shouted enthusiastically, Food fight! As Rasher took his place on the packed sands of the food fight arena, he felt the same thrill that always bubbled through him when he entered the regular training area. He'd never participated in a food fight, although he'd witnessed some. Few wanted to face a bacon master one-on-one, but Balter was smiling confidently. Thousands of elite soldiers lived, worked, and trained together in the Acropolis, so arguments were common. Officers tended to get upset when soldiers killed each other, so food fights were a popular outlet to settle disagreements. On the walk over, one of the other soldiers had said that Balter had competed in a dozen food fights and always won. Not surprising, given his advanced meat enhancements. Balter was stronger, faster, and far more nimble than almost anyone else. To develop those kinds of enhancements, Balter must have eaten tiger meat prepared by skilled meat mages for years. Access to such specialty predator meats was strictly controlled and very expensive. Either Balter was related to one of the highest primi or secondi ruling families, or he had won patronage from one of them. He'd won a position as lieutenant of one of the Gleaner Fists, so he could fight. He'd probably take the direct approach in a food fight. Luckily, food fights were chock full of options to modify the contest. Rasher scanned the regular food fight area as the staff finished the setup. The previous battle cuisine demonstrations were gone. Scores of spectators crowded the long galleys surrounding the arena's wooden walls and pressed close to the edge of the upstairs viewing platforms. A hint of smoke hung in the air from a recent exploding cake demonstration, and scents from a dozen other military-grade foods lingered, melding together to form an exciting scent with a hint of danger. People were making loud bets, and Balter was the clear favorite. "I wager 20 silver spoons on myself," Rasher declared loudly, to both cheering and laughter. One of the betting officials waved to him and noted the bet. If Rasher won, he was about to make a lot of money. He decided not to think about losing. Bacon only sizzled when dropped into the fire. Balter called, "I shouldn't be surprised you can't read the writing on the wall." "Can you even read the writing on the wall?" "This is going to be fun." Balter grinned. "A personal wager, then," Rasher said loudly. "What kind of wager?" Balter asked suspiciously. "If you win, I will publicly apologize for whatever offense it was that you have against me." "That's a start," Balter said. How had he developed such a grudge without Rasher even knowing him? Sumwinkle, who stood with Odomot among the front ranks of the onlookers behind the protective low wall surrounding the arena, called out, "And what if you win, Rasher?" Rasher met his gaze and said, "If I win, then you and Balter join me tomorrow for a private training lesson." That generated a round of laughter from the onlookers. Balter scowled, and Odomot rolled his eyes at Rasher's audacity. Sumwinkle grinned and shrugged. "Why not? If you can defeat Balter, maybe you've got something to teach." "Don't encourage the fool," Balter growled. "He's got sugar for brains already." Rasher grinned at him. "If you're getting nervous, Balter, why don't you bring a couple more of your fist tomorrow for emotional support? That way a little non-lethal combat won't worry you so much." "You just can't keep that mouth shut, can you?" Balter said as he slammed one meaty fist into his other palm. "I'm going to thoroughly enjoy closing it for you." Mission accomplished, and in perhaps the most unique way. He might win a private lesson with one of the Reapers. His luck was about to change. All he had to do was defeat the Gleaner champion. As easy as trying to eat a piece of exploding cake without losing teeth. The staff had set up the food fight with small shelves that locked into grooves set into the wooden walls, spaced widely apart, ranging from about knee-height to almost 12 feet up. On each shelf sat a magical food item, ranging from the more common ones, like a trio of already burning muffins sitting on a pedestal in the center of the room, to rarer and potentially more decisive items placed on the harder-to-reach shelves. He spotted 2 different varieties of confectioner cookies. On a high shelf was a chocolate chip cookie that would offer a temporary sugar boost to strength and speed. Not very useful to Rasher, who couldn't use it while also releasing bacon. The other one was a fan-shaped sugar cookie that offered more potential, but it sat on the highest shelf halfway down the wall. Other shelves included a head of broccoli prepared by a vegetable shaman, a rare cup of seafood shaman lobster bisque, and a couple different shelves with little paper bags packed with Spice Wizard air-manipulating mixtures. One official with a wide-brimmed felt hat stepped to the edge of the arena and raised his hand for quiet. As the crowds hushed, he called, "Are the contestants ready?" As soon as they both nodded, the man rang a bell fastened to the wall 3 times and shouted, "Go!" As Rasher expected, Balter charged straight at the center pedestal with its burning muffins. Rasher didn't try to beat the big man to the center. Getting that close that fast and losing the initial dash would leave him with burning muffins smashed into his face and probably end the duel in the first seconds. So instead, he scurried to the side to one of the shelves at about knee-height along the left wall, closer to his end. The crowd cheered loudly as Balter reached the pedestal, scooped up the first muffin, and instantly hurled it. The muffin rocketed across the arena, exploding against the shelf Rasher had been reaching for. Burning muffin disintegrated the small block of sharp yellow cheddar cheese he'd been hoping to grab. The crowds cheered even louder, calling new bets. Rasher stumbled back with a low curse, wiping burning muffin off his hands. The sharp scent of scorched sugar made him want to sneeze. Balter was even faster than he'd feared. Smearing that cheese on Balter's face would have burned like fire. That would have been fun. As he backpedaled, Balter threw the second muffin. Rasher released crispy bacon into his body and somersaulted sideways, easily dodging and generating a fresh wave of cheering. The feel of the bacon radiating out through his muscles was like wisps of warm vapor curling up from sizzling bacon on a hot griddle. Balter scooped up the last muffin, but instead of throwing it, he started slowly advancing, muffin held at the ready. "Griddle cakes," Rasher cursed softly. Balter wasn't supposed to be clever as well as insanely overpowered. If he managed to close the distance, he could smash Rasher with that muffin, then beat the stuffing out of him while he was distracted. Time to show what a bacon master who'd just eaten 16 desserts could do. Rasher always taught his students when an enemy wants you to hold your ground, charge. So, he released the power of 3 full pieces of crispy bacon all at once from his internal bacon stores, and combined it with the sizzle built up from eating all night. A single piece of bacon could double his physical abilities for up to a full minute. 3 pieces at once could increase his skills by an additional 50%. All that sizzle added even more. With the unrivaled power of bacon erupting through his system, those curling wisps of warmth sharpened into sizzling bolts of crispy lightning. Rasher dashed across the arena, moving even faster than Balter had a moment earlier. The move caught the big man by surprise for a second, and that was all the time Rasher needed. When he reached the wall, he didn't slow, but jumped, turning in the air and using his speed and momentum to run right up onto the wall. In a flash, he raced down the length of the wall, scooping up items from 3 separate shelves. Balter reacted quickly, sprinting to cut him off and throwing the final muffin. Rasher jumped away from the wall with a forward flip as he soared out over the arena. He caught the muffin as he spun, using a feather-soft touch to redirect its path and send it back toward Balter. Balter couldn't dodge fast enough and ended up swatting the muffin aside with a forearm, splashing burning muffin all over himself. He ignored the flaming pastry, pursuing Rasher, murder in his eyes. Rasher threw the head of broccoli he'd just snatched from one of the shelves to the ground right in front of Balter. A deep pit appeared in the floor under Balter's foot, and he fell, shouting angry curses. The crowd gasped as Rasher rushed toward the hole. He doubted it had dropped Balter more than 10 or 12 feet. Too bad cats weren't known for landing on their heads. Sure enough, Balter erupted out of the hole, golden eyes blazing with anger. Rasher slugged him in the face with the bowl of lobster bisque. The bowl shattered, splattering the creamy soup all over Balter's eyes and nose. Instantly, a torrent of water exploded out of thin air, blasting the furious soldier back down into the hole. That was even more impressive than Rasher had hoped for. The waterfall lasted only a second, but it still half filled the hole. The crowd cheered louder than ever. The air suddenly smelled humid and heavy, carrying a hint of clean, salty ocean breeze. Rasher dropped to one knee next to the pit. A second later, Balter surged to the surface, grasping for the edge, still wiping bisque out of his eyes. Rasher hit him in the face with the sugar cookie, mashing it against his skin. Balter gasped, swiping at Rasher with a hand. All of his fingernails had grown into long claws. They could have opened his face to the bone. With bacon-enhanced reflexes, Rasher rolled back and retreated a few steps as Balter lunged out of the hole, dripping wet and boiling mad. He pawed at the cookie clinging to his sodden face and growled, "I'll tear your arms off for that." He charged. Rasher watched, a smile on his lips, as Balter ran just past him, tackling an empty patch of air. He hit the ground hard, sliding all the way to the wall. Those cookie-fueled hallucinations kicked in fast. As Balter grunted and fought an imaginary foe, the crowds laughed. Rasher trotted across to the shelf with the bags of spices. One could trigger explosive vomiting, and another unleash a mini tornado in a restricted space. Either could ruin Balter's day. He headed back toward his distracted opponent and hefted the first one, then looked over at the official near the bell. "Do I have to finish this?" Balter was still scrabbling in the sand, trying to choke an invisible opponent. He had no idea where Rasher was and could do nothing to avoid the spice attack. Rasher didn't want to totally humiliate the big man, even if he might deserve it. Balter was still one of the gleaners, after all. The official looked to the crowds and asked loudly, "What say you?" Some people, no doubt angered by the loss of their bets, called for Rasher to keep punishing Balter. Most agreed the food fight was over. Rasher raised his hands in victory to thunderous applause. He'd given them a good show, and the crowds roared their appreciation. He headed toward where Sumwinkle stood, but couldn't see Odomot anywhere. Had the bacon master left early? Lame. Sumwinkle smiled, his gaze thoughtful. "We'll see you at the practice field tomorrow morning." "You won't regret it, sir," Rasher promised. When he glanced back at Balter, he was startled to see Odomot helping the big man to his feet. He spoke softly to him, and Balter's head snapped up suddenly in surprise. He smiled, a predatory grin. That couldn't be good news. Bacon